These scores are impossible. She must have cheated. You expect me to believe they did this on their own? That was how it started, a whisper behind closed doors. By the time the district called her in, her name was already flagged. By the time they searched her classroom, they already believed she was guilty. But what they didn't know was that Miss Janine Porter wasn't just a teacher. She was the storm they never saw coming. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching us from. Janine Porter arrived at Roosevelt Middle School every morning by 6:45 a.m. The parking lot was usually empty. Only the janitor, Mr. Collins, ever beat her there. She brought 2 bags, one with books and the other with snacks, for the kids who never had breakfast. Her classroom, room 208, was bright, not fancy. No new laptops or smartboards, just a beat-up whiteboard and 24 chip desks. But her students? They lit up that room. You're not here to pass. You're here to prove, she said every morning. And they believed her. They worked hard. Spelling drills at lunch, reading comprehension after school, math practice during recess. Every test they took, every paragraph they wrote, she tracked. Every small win, she celebrated. So when her 7th graders scored in the 96th percentile on the National Literacy Assessment, she was proud, but not surprised. They earned it. But the district didn't see it that way. On a Friday morning in April, 2 administrators from central office knocked on her door during 3rd period. Miss Porter, can we speak privately? She followed them to the conference room. One wore a suit. The other didn't look up from his clipboard. They got right to it. There's been a concern regarding the recent standardized testing results. Concern? The numbers. From your classroom. They don't align with projections. Janine frowned. My students worked for those scores. The man with the clipboard spoke next. We've reviewed 5 years of district data. Historically, your subgroup underperforms. He didn't say it. He didn't need to. She knew exactly what your subgroup meant. So you're saying they're too smart to be believed? Silence. The woman leaned forward. We're not accusing anyone, but we flagged your classroom for further review. She slid over a document. Academic Integrity Investigation, Tier 2 Trigger. Janine blinked. You think I helped them? The man shrugged. There's evidence of irregular erasure patterns on over 40% of the answer sheets. You're digging through pencils now? He didn't laugh. You'll be temporarily removed from testing environments until the matter is resolved. When she returned to her classroom, 2 other adults were inside, photographing her bulletin boards. The students stared at her. She smiled, but her hands were shaking. Later that day, the district sent a notice to every parent. Room 208 under review. Possible testing violations. No proof. No verdict. Just a stain. By Monday, half the kids were pulled from her class. By Wednesday, news crews parked outside. And by Friday, they'd already searched her desk 3 times. No one asked how a classroom with no working printer could produce the highest reading scores in the district. They just assumed someone cheated. Because brilliance wasn't part of the profile. Janine sat alone after school, grading essays she wasn't sure anyone would read again. She glanced at the wall, still covered with goals, posters, and poems. One read, "We rise by lifting others." She took it down, folded it slowly, because now no one was lifting her. By Tuesday, Janine Porter had lost control of her classroom. Not because of the students, they still tried. They still looked to her with the same wide, uncertain eyes. But something invisible now sat between them. An unspoken question. Did she cheat? At 8:01 a.m., District Compliance Officer Howard Beck entered room 208. He didn't knock. He wore a laminated badge clipped to his collar and carried a narrow leather folder that never left his hands. I'll be observing, he said flatly. Janine nodded. She'd been warned. No lesson plan would be trusted now unless it was first pre-approved and observed. Beck sat in the back, silent, watching everything. Where she stood, who she called on, what materials she used. When she offered to review past assignments, he took notes. When she praised a student for improving a paragraph, he raised an eyebrow. Every kind word became evidence. Every correction, a potential manipulation. He stayed all day. That afternoon, a letter went out to parents. Not from her. From the district. Please be advised that instructional staff in room 208 are under academic review. Students may be reassigned at the discretion of administration. The next morning, 7 more students were gone. One left a note on her desk. Miss Porter, I know you didn't cheat. They just scared my mom. I'm sorry. She kept that note in her pocket because it was the only support she had. At the staff meeting Thursday, no one sat next to her. Even Principal Hanley avoided eye contact. She had built this program from scratch. She brought test scores up 37% in 2 years. Started a Saturday reading circle. Got kids into advanced high school tracks. None of it mattered now. The district had already suspended her access to internal servers. Her lesson plans had to be emailed to a supervisor daily. The observers rotated in and out of her room every 2 days. By Friday, someone went through her personal drawer. She knew it wasn't a student. The papers weren't scattered, just reorganized. Her post-it notes were gone. So was her photo of her and her son, Malik. She didn't report it. There was no one to tell. That weekend, she stayed home. Didn't answer calls. Didn't check email. She sat on the floor with Malik, building towers out of cereal boxes. He laughed every time one fell. "Why are you sad today?" he asked. She paused. "Mommy's school is being mean to her." He tilted his head. "Did you do something bad?" She shook her head. "No, baby. But sometimes people don't need a reason." Malik thought about that, then nodded. "That's like when Jaden got in trouble 'cause the teacher thought he stole snacks. But he didn't. It was just his backpack was open." Janine looked at her son, 6 years old, already understanding how the world assigns guilt. By Monday morning, the final blow came. An email from Human Resources. "Please report to the district hearing room at 3 p.m. this Thursday. Bring representation if desired. No accusation. No findings. Just the implication that she was no longer a teacher, only a suspect. And her crime? Believing her students were capable of excellence." Janine Porter sat in the district hearing room at exactly 2:55 p.m. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The walls were bare except for a framed quote. "Excellence with integrity." 3 people waited behind the long table. Ms. Rennick from Human Resources, Mr. Patel from Assessment and Accountability, and Dr. Enright, Deputy Superintendent. None of them smiled. She brought no lawyer. She couldn't afford one. Just a folder with lesson plans, attendance logs, and a letter of support from one parent, the only one brave enough to write it. Dr. Enright adjusted his glasses. "This isn't a disciplinary hearing, Ms. Porter. Just a fact-finding session." She nodded once. Rennick began. "When did you first notice a shift in student performance?" "October, after we introduced the multi-reading framework." "And what prompted that?" "The students asked for more challenge." Patel interrupted. "You're saying 7th graders voluntarily requested harder texts?" Janine met his gaze. "Yes." He scribbled something. "And how would you explain the average jump of 22 percentile points across the cohort?" "Consistency. We worked before and after school. Lunches. Saturdays." Enright leaned forward. "You say we. Were there any volunteers?" "No. Just me." Another note scribbled. "And all 24 students were present for the testing?" 22 were. 2 had excused absences. "And none received assistance?" "None." Rennick opened a folder. "Ms. Porter, are you aware that 5 of your students had erasure patterns matching statistical anomalies flagged by ETS? I'm aware that they were nervous and used pencils." Patel didn't laugh. "These anomalies are rare. Most often seen in cases of adult-led tampering." Janine's voice was quiet. "You're implying I changed answers." Rennick glanced up. "We're not implying anything. We're asking how you explain it." Janine opened her folder. "These are the lesson logs. Attendance. Reading benchmarks. Essay feedback. Vocabulary charts. I've tracked every minute of our instruction since August." She placed the papers on the table. "They didn't look at them." Patel shifted. "You've taught here how long?" 9 years. "And this is the first cohort to reach this level?" She nodded. "The first to believe they could." That answer hung in the air like a challenge. Dr. Enright cleared his throat. "Ms. Porter, can you see how this appears to others? A historically underperforming group suddenly testing in the top 5% nationally?" She stared at him. "You mean a black group?" Silence. No one corrected her. Rennick's tone shifted. "We've spoken with your colleagues. Some say your methods are unconventional." Janine leaned forward now. "Because I give them dictionaries? Because I call their parents when they do well, not just when they fail?" No response. She exhaled. "You're not questioning data. You're questioning possibility." Enright straightened his tie. "We'll notify you in writing of any next steps." The hearing was over. No ruling. No charges. No apology. Just a chair left cold, and eyes that never quite saw her. She stepped out of the room, alone. The hallway echoed with the sound of laughter from a nearby classroom. The system kept moving, but she had stopped. Because it wasn't just her under review now. It was the very idea that they could succeed without cheating to do it. By Monday morning, Janine's nameplate had been quietly removed from the classroom door. No explanation. No notice. Just an empty space where her presence used to be. Room 208 was now labeled Interim Placement, Section B. Inside sat a substitute, a retired teacher who didn't know the students, their struggles, or their names. Janine wasn't fired. She wasn't even suspended. She'd been temporarily reassigned. A bureaucratic term meaning, we want you gone, but we don't want a lawsuit. Her new assignment? Sorting outdated textbooks in a backroom behind the library. No students. No voice. No dignity. The email read, supportive duty pending outcome of inquiry. Report daily to the media storage annex. She didn't cry. She showed up. Every morning. But each book she stamped, each dusty box she opened, drove a deeper wedge between who she was and who they now told her she could be. On Wednesday, she walked past her old classroom during dismissal. A student, Tiana, caught her eye and paused, then lowered her gaze. Hi, Miss Porter. Her voice was barely a whisper. Janine smiled gently. How are you? Tiana hesitated, glancing behind her. They told us not to talk about you. Who did? The lady with the clipboard. Said it would confuse things. Before Janine could respond, a parent called out. Tiana, come on. Let's go. The girl gave her a tiny wave and ran off. Janine stood still for a long time. She wasn't erased, just untouchable. That evening, she opened her email and found 7 new messages. All anonymous. All vicious. Stop lying to those kids. We know what this really is. Affirmative action isn't a miracle. It's a cover. How much were you paid? She closed her laptop, turned to Malik, who sat on the floor with crayons. What color is that one? She asked. He held up a brown crayon. It's called cinnamon chestnut. Sounds yummy. She smiled. It does. Is that your skin color? She looked at him. I think so. Why? He shrugged. Some boy at school said your skin is what gets you in trouble. Her hand froze. Who said that? I don't know. But I told him you're just smart. She kissed his forehead. But the lump in her throat stayed until morning. On Friday, her principal finally called her in. Not to apologize. To warn. We've received a petition from several parents asking for your permanent removal. Based on what? He didn't answer. She stood. You know my record. You know my work. He avoided her eyes. It's not about the work anymore. That sentence sat between them like a sealed coffin. She stepped out into the hallway. And there, standing at the edge of the cafeteria, were 3 of her former students, watching her. One raised a fist. Soft, subtle, barely above waist level. A signal. They still believed, even if no one else did. But belief wouldn't be enough. Now, Janine had to fight. And not just for herself, for every student she ever told, you are more than what they see. Janine hadn't planned to fight. She planned to survive. Until one night, sorting donated books in the media annex, she found an old black binder mislabeled, Archived Admin Memos, 2014. Curious, she flipped through. Inside, years of policy updates, internal decisions, procedural notes. Most boring. Some useful. One page caught her eye. Testing Integrity Investigation Guidelines, Escalation Protocol. She read it twice, then 3 more times. The document clearly stated that no Tier 2 investigation could proceed without a signed affidavit from a proctor, independent retesting of at least 10% of flagged students, and written notice delivered directly to the educator within 72 hours. None of that had happened. She never received notice. No affidavit had been mentioned, and not a single child had been retested. The more she read, the more holes she found. Page after page of protocols ignored. Janine Porter may not have been a lawyer, but she was an educator. And educators read everything. That weekend, she filed a formal public records request. On Monday, she received a reply. Your request is under review. Estimated completion time, 14 business days. Standard delay tactic. But she wasn't waiting. She wrote down the names of every parent whose child had been pulled from room 208. Then she started calling them. Ms. Wallace, this is Janine Porter. I was Malik's reading teacher. I'd like to speak with you about some irregularities in the investigation. Most hung up. 2 cursed at her. But one said, what kind of irregularities? Janine explained. Carefully. Factually. Without emotion. The mother was silent for a moment. They told us you admitted guilt. Janine's breath caught. That's not true. I was never even accused formally. Pause. Then why did they reassign you? Because they could. That mother called 2 more parents. By Thursday, 6 mothers had agreed to meet her in a local library. They brought printouts, testing notices, emails, statements from the district, and none of them matched. One letter said Janine had been suspended. Another claimed she voluntarily stepped down. A third implied her students' scores were pending disqualification. They're rewriting the story, one woman said. Janine nodded. That's why we document everything. She showed them the policy memo. They passed it around like it was a bomb. Because it was. The next day, the district's compliance office received a certified envelope with 13 pages of discrepancies and 7 parent signatures. Inside was also a typed note. This is not an appeal. It's a record. If my students' names are being erased, I'm keeping track of every finger that holds the eraser. Janine Porter. They didn't respond. But something changed. At 4:12 p.m., her school email account was mysteriously reactivated. At 6:07 p.m., her staff portal was restored. At 7:45 p.m., a copy of her pending file was leaked to a local education blogger. Anonymous source. The file included internal messages between district leaders. One line stood out. We can't prove she cheated, but we also can't prove they earned it. That was the moment the public saw what this really was. Not an investigation. A decision. To disbelieve excellence from the wrong classroom. From the wrong kids. From the wrong teacher. But Janine wasn't wrong. She was just louder now. By Monday, the district's tone had shifted. No more veiled language. No more passive phrases. Now it was control. Janine received a formal letter from the Office of Legal Affairs. Your recent correspondence contains language interpreted as adversarial and misleading. We urge you to cease external communications until the review is complete. She read it twice, then printed it, stapled it to the wall of the library storage annex, and wrote in red ink across the page. If the truth makes you nervous, try telling it next time. That afternoon, a district official showed up at her door. Tall, clean suit, thin smile. Miss Porter, may we talk? Not without counsel. He blinked. She pointed to the library sign-in sheet. According to your own memo, any in-person contact requires written scheduling. You're violating policy 6.14. He didn't argue. He just left. But now, she knew. They were watching. Because she stopped being a suspect. She'd become a threat. That evening, a new article hit the education blog circuit. Title: Test scores, teacher suspended, truth missing. What happened in room 208? It quoted parents. It quoted excerpts from internal policy. And it quoted Janine. Not dramatically. Just this line. I don't teach statistics. I teach students. Maybe that's the problem. The article spread. By morning, her inbox had over 200 messages. Some hateful. Some doubting. But many curious. What really happened? Is there a petition? My son never liked reading until your class. Can I help? 2 days later, the district held a closed-door meeting. The agenda wasn't public, but an anonymous staffer leaked the minutes. One line stood out. If we reinstate her, we admit fault. If we don't, we fuel perception. They weren't protecting truth. They were protecting themselves. That night, Janine met with 3 education attorneys. She didn't want a lawsuit. She wanted the record corrected. One of the attorneys, a woman named Ellis, leaned in. They're trying to outlast you. Then we don't wait, Janine replied. We move first. Ellis smiled. Good. Because I've already filed a formal Freedom of Information Act request for all internal emails regarding your name and room 208. Pause. And we'll submit the parents' memo to the state board this Friday. Janine nodded. And I'll write the press release. On Friday morning, it went live. A simple headline, posted to every district bulletin board, social media page, and inbox. We taught them. They believed us. You punished that. Statement from Janine Porter, educator. It included no names. No blame. Just receipts. Dates. Test protocols. Erasure data from other classrooms, some higher than hers, never flagged. And at the bottom, if you think brilliance is a statistical error, maybe it's your formula that's broken. By noon, it had been shared 60,000 times. By 3 p.m., a national education podcast requested an interview. By 6 p.m., someone tried to reset her staff password. By 7, she got a call. From a number she hadn't seen in weeks. Principal Hanley. Janine, they're asking if you'll consider reinstatement. She let the silence sit. Then answered quietly. You don't reinstate what you never officially removed. Click. She didn't cry. She didn't celebrate. She just turned to her son, Malik, and said, "We're not done yet." Because being right wasn't the goal. Being heard was. The envelope arrived on a Thursday. Thick paper. Official seal. Delivered by hand. Malik brought it in, curious. "Is it from the school?" Janine nodded slowly. But she didn't open it right away. She waited until he went to bed. Then she unfolded the letter. The Board of Education, in coordination with the superintendent's office, formally invites Ms. Janine Porter to return to full instructional duties effective Monday, with reappointment to room 208. We appreciate her patience during the district's review. No apology. No admission. Just 6 lines of institutional erasure. As if the last 4 weeks hadn't happened. As if her name hadn't been dragged, her reputation broken, her students scattered. She folded the letter. Called her attorney. "They're offering reinstatement." Ellis didn't sound surprised. Of course they are. Public pressure finally outweighed their arrogance. "What would you do?" A pause. "That depends. Do you want your classroom or your clarity?" Janine didn't answer. Because the truth was she wanted both. Friday morning, she walked into the district building. No press. No fanfare. Just silence. In the HR lobby, a woman greeted her. "Miss Porter, congratulations. We're thrilled to have you back." Janine tilted her head. "Are you?" The woman hesitated. "Of course. We all just want to move forward." Moving forward requires acknowledgement, not avoidance. Another awkward pause. Then, "You'll be returning to your old classroom." Cleaned. Cleared. That word struck. Cleared. Like she had been something to disinfect. At 10 a.m., she entered room 208. It was empty. Clean whiteboard. Sanitized desks. No posters. No signs of life. The bulletin board had been stripped. Only the staples remained, like scars. She stood in the center of the room and closed her eyes. She saw their faces. Tiana. Miles. Jameson. Sierra. Darnell. Children they treated as statistical noise. She opened her eyes. Then walked out. Straight to the superintendent's office. She didn't knock. She placed a single document on the desk. Formal conditions of return, Janine Porter. For lines. 1. Full reinstatement without probation. 2. Official retraction of integrity concerns from her personnel file. 3. Public statement acknowledging investigation procedural violations. 4. A district-wide workshop led by her titled Bias and Expectations. The superintendent looked up, stunned. "These are serious. So were your mistakes. We can't commit to a public." She cut him off. "Then I'm not coming back." He blinked. "You're walking away from your job?" "No. I'm walking toward what this job was supposed to mean." He hesitated. "This will cause backlash." She leaned in. "So did accusing a black teacher of cheating because her students tested well." Silence. Then he looked down at the paper and signed. By the end of the day, a notice went out to every staff member, parent, and media contact. After a thorough review, the district acknowledges procedural failures in its handling of the Room 208 case. Ms. Porter has been reinstated with full honors. We recognize the need for reflection and recommitment to equity in evaluation. It wasn't perfect, but it was recorded, and that mattered, because Janine knew something now. The system wouldn't save her, but it could be forced to recognize her. And that was just the beginning. Monday morning, 7:02 a.m. Janine stood in front of room 208 for the first time in 34 days. Same hallway, same door, different woman. She wore a navy blouse, simple earrings, and a lanyard that said literacy matters. But the new weight she carried wasn't on her shoulders, it was in her silence. As she opened the door, she found what she expected. Stripped walls, covered windows, and a desk with nothing on it but dust. But by 7:45, students began to return. First came Tiana, then Jordan, then Kamari, who walked in without a word, sat at his old desk, and started unpacking as if nothing had happened. By 8 o'clock, 14 students were present. No one said, "Welcome back." No one needed to. Janine looked at them and said simply, "We've got catching up to do." They opened their notebooks and got to work. During recess, she walked the perimeter of the blacktop, clipboard in hand. 2 teachers passed by. One nodded. The other looked away. She didn't blame them. It wasn't about hatred. It was about disruption. She had proven that the rules they built their careers around could be wrong. That exceptional didn't have to mean rare. That excellence in black and brown classrooms wasn't a miracle, it was possible. And that made her dangerous. At 12:40 p.m., Principal Hanley entered her classroom. He stood at the door. "How's the first day?" Janine didn't look up. "I never left." He shifted. "We're having a staff debrief Wednesday. You're welcome to share your experience." She looked at him now. "Will it be recorded?" "I'm not sure." "Then I'm not interested." He swallowed. "I hope we can rebuild trust." Janine closed her gray book. Trust requires action, not meetings. He left without another word. That afternoon, a mother waited by the school gate. Nia Wallace. She approached slowly. "Miss Porter?" Janine nodded. "Thank you for not disappearing." Janine smiled. "Thank you for not letting me." Nia pulled out an envelope. "We've organized a group. Parents, neighbors, alumni. We're funding your classroom directly. Supplies, books, materials. No more waiting for the district." Janine took the envelope with both hands. "You don't owe me anything." Nia shook her head. "We don't. But we owe them. The kids." By 4 p.m., the classroom had color again. Posters, affirmation cards, a handmade banner. 208 strong proof, not permission. Students stayed after school, taping borders, restocking dictionaries, unboxing donated materials. One boy, Xavier, held up a new chapter book. "Are we allowed to take these home?" Janine knelt beside him. "You're allowed to own them. They're yours now." His face lit up. No standardized test could measure that. That night, her story aired on a national education podcast. Clips from her classroom, excerpts from district emails, and her final words in the interview. "I was never on trial. My belief in them was. And that belief still stands." The host asked, "What now?" Janine's voice didn't shake. "Now we build." And the district? They already had their chance. The next morning, 26 of 28 students were back in room 208. And at 9 a.m., the State Education Board announced a new initiative. Reviewing bias and academic oversight inspired by recent events in Nashville. They didn't mention her name, but the students knew. So did the parents. And Janine? She didn't need the credit. She had the classroom. And this time, she wasn't leaving it without a fight. The email came at 6:13 a.m. An anonymous concern has been filed regarding room 208. Allegation: political indoctrination through curriculum bias. Investigation pending. No signature. No proof. Just the same old mask. Different lie. Janine read it once. Then again. She wasn't surprised. Because when a black woman refuses to shrink, they always look for a new reason to silence her. At 10:15 a.m., a district observer appeared at her door again. Same clipboard. Same smile. Just here to check alignment with curriculum guidelines. Janine didn't flinch. "Would you like a copy of the district's approved reading list?" The observer blinked. That won't be necessary." "I think it will," she said. Then handed him a binder. Color-coded. Indexed. Every lesson aligned, cited, and time-stamped. She had learned. They taught her how to fight them by their own rules. At 12:40 p.m., she received a second message. "Student testimonies have been requested." She paused, then sent a letter home to every parent in room 208. Clear, transparent, direct. "Dear families, an anonymous complaint has been filed. I want you to know what's being said, how I'm responding, and that your children are safe, respected, and heard. If you'd like to be present during any district conversations with your child, you have the legal right to attend. Sincerely, Ms. Janine Porter." Within 24 hours, her inbox overflowed. "We stand with you. They're doing this again? Tell us where to show up." One parent, Mr. Hughes, printed the letter and handed out 20 copies at his barber shop. By Friday, 34 parents had signed a joint response. Room 208 is not political. It's principled. And the principle is, our children deserve better. But the real shift came from the students. Because this time, they were watching closely. Tiana raised her hand during reading hour. "Miss Porter, can I say something?" "Of course." Tiana stood. "They think you're teaching us to protest." Janine held her breath. "But you're not. You're just teaching us that we matter." The room went still. One by one, other voices joined. And to ask questions. And to read like it's power. And that being smart isn't something we have to hide. Janine didn't speak. She didn't need to. That day, room 208 turned into something no board could monitor. Proof. Not on paper. Not in data. But in them. Later that week, the district quietly dropped the complaint. No apology. No announcement. Just a single update in the personnel portal. Investigation closed. No findings. Janine screenshotted it. Framed it. Not as a trophy. As a warning. Because that was the last time they tried. And the first time she smiled without fear. At dismissal, Malik waited for her near the stairs. He held her hand all the way to the car. They tried again? Yes. Did it work? She looked down at him. What do you think? He grinned. No way. She kissed his forehead. Because even a 6-year-old knew. When truth stands tall, lies run out of places to hide. 3 weeks passed. No more observers. No more memos. No more shadows outside room 208. Just learning. Quiet. Focused. Relentless. By spring, her students exceeded every benchmark in the district. Again. This time, no one dared question it. The data stood alone. And this time, it stood undisputed. On the last Friday of the school year, Janine found a note taped to her desk. Child's handwriting. You didn't give up on us, so we didn't give up on ourselves. She didn't recognize the signature. That made it even more powerful. She folded the note, placed it in her wallet. Not for memory. For protection. That evening, the district hosted its annual Educators of Impact banquet. She didn't attend. She was nominated, but declined, because the recognition she needed wasn't on a stage. It was at a table, 2 rows back from the door, where Kamari sat reading aloud to a group of second graders, where Tiana helped a new student learn how to spell responsibility, where Malik, now 7, told his classmates, "My mom teaches truth. That's her subject." 1 week later, Janine received a plain envelope from the state board. Inside, a certification of commendation and a typed statement. This acknowledgement is issued for your contribution to equitable education practices, resilience in the face of procedural failure, and demonstrated commitment to instructional integrity. She stared at it for a long time, not because it erased the pain, but because it documented the truth. And the truth, once recorded, doesn't go away quietly. On her final day before summer break, she stayed late to clean the room. Malik helped wipe down desks. "Can I keep one of the signs?" She nodded. He pulled down a laminated quote from the back wall. "Read it aloud. We rise by lifting others." He held it like a treasure. She smiled, because that quote had been there the day they tried to break her. And it was still standing, like she was. Outside, the halls were quiet. Only the sound of her heels on tile. She passed the main office, the same one where no one had met her eyes months ago. Now, heads turned. Some nodded. Others stepped aside. Not out of fear. Out of respect. Because Janine Porter had become something untouchable. Not because of power, but because she had survived without becoming small. In her car, she opened her laptop one last time. Typed one sentence into a new document. "They tried to make my faith in children a liability. It became my legacy." She closed it. Drove home. No camera crews followed. No headlines. But the silence around her was different now. It wasn't isolation. It was peace. And when school returned that fall, room 208 would still be hers. But now, it wouldn't just be a classroom. It would be a landmark of what happens when a Black woman chooses not to break, but to teach. Anyway, share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that inspire action and hope.